The Officer's Manual of the Imperial Army, 1897, Part 1, Life on Venus. I would especially like to note that this is not pulp fiction of that time, this is an officer's manual. Therefore, our attitude towards this information should be special. After all, if the highest command of the army knew this, you can imagine the level of understanding the officers had and what cause and effect relationships they could establish about what was happening. By tracking the depth of the processes that bring changes to the surrounding world, life on Venus. All spiritually intelligent beings whom God has predestined to live, exist, and evolve in our solar system after their creation. They are instantly settled in the astral spheres of Venus. Arriving in these spheres in their astral bodies, they can stay invisible to Venus's people, live among them, and observe their customs, morals, habits, and lifestyle. The guardian spirit, entrusted to them by God, guides them around the planet and points out the good and evil done by the people of Venus. They show them all the differences between themselves, warn them against evil, and do their best to inspire good intentions and the desire to imitate goodness. The guardian spirit, having indicated the direction of activity that the being entrusted to him should take, chooses the kind of life that would be most beneficial for it to adopt when born on Venus, and acquaints it in detail with all its characteristics. He tries to impress upon his ward that he is beginning his life journey on an extremely difficult planet in terms of living conditions, full of temptations, vices, diseases, and hardships. But that all his future lives depend on the good results of this life, and therefore he must strive to live it as well as possible. He must live in God and in love for his neighbor. The guardian spirit draws his attention to the fact that during his life on Venus, he will be left entirely to his own devices and his own free will. That there will be no guardian angel with him who could protect him from the attacks of malice. Therefore, he must act all the more cautiously and carefully, since he can rely only on his own strength and his own care for himself. In most cases, these newly called to life beings, these young souls just summoned by God from a state of non-existence, are so happy to have received life. They like it so much that the whole planet, with all its difficult conditions, seems like paradise to them. They look forward to the pleasure of living on it with a certain excitement, and willingly following the advice of their guardian spirit, they accept the kind of life he has chosen for them. All Venus life forms experience the same effect. They gladly take any form that offers the most pleasure as long as they can live, because they love life. Venus would not make such a pleasant impression on us. On the contrary, we would be horrified to see it, for at first glance it would make the most depressing impression on us. Venusians' bodies resemble ours externally. They stand upright with arms, legs, and a head, but their bodies are much rougher and heavier. It weighs almost 4 times more than ours, and burdens the inhabitants of Venus far more than our earthly bodies burden and constrain us. The soil of Venus is just as rough and heavy as their bodies. It is almost barren, extremely difficult to cultivate, and for this reason the inhabitants of Venus hardly cultivate it at all. The water on Venus is almost as dense as our Mercury, and we could easily walk on it. The air of the planet Venus would make more of an impression on us like our water than our air, because this air significantly hinders movement. The vegetation is extremely coarse and unattractive, with almost no bright flowers anywhere on the planet. The trees are extraordinarily tall, about 10 times taller than our largest trees. The trunks of these giants are so thick that sometimes several families live in a single hollow. The trees are so sturdy in structure that the inhabitants of Venus have not yet found a way to cut them down. They don't have the proper tools or equipment for this. The foliage of both trees and shrubs is brown and gloomy. No soft leaves are visible. All of it is extremely resilient. It bends but doesn't break. It's all some kind of cones and growths. Everything is gnarled, twisted, and unattractive. Among these trees there are also fruit trees, but their fruits are covered in a very rough shell. They are dry and tasteless. They resemble our nuts or pine cones but are much larger, with shells so tough that Venus residents need special tools to open them. The grass resembles our reeds. It is extremely strong and resilient. Even the flowers are of some dark, dirty and indistinct colors. Venus's landscape is extremely harsh and unattractive. Venus has many animals, especially predators, that are as tough and harsh as the planet's environment. Some are gigantic and all are vicious, greedy and voracious. People live in large groups, close together, not just in tree hollows, but also in dugouts, caves and huts. They don't even have the custom of having a room or space for one person, where someone could be alone, concentrate or rest. But all of them sleep and eat together, with several families in the same hut or cave. On Venus, a person is enslaved by their organization, passions, whims, and lack of discipline. The needs of his coarse body enslave a person to such an extent, and he lacks the willpower to even slightly resist the pull of his weak nature. People of Venus are extremely sensitive to the weather and changes in temperature, and in general they are very prone to illnesses. Their health is disturbed by the slightest physical causes and they recover very slowly. People on Venus are generally low in energy and they have just enough physical strength to move their bodies. They walk slowly and get tired quickly, but this does not prevent them from being extremely proud, stubborn, arrogant, and possessing an unusually persistent character. Everyone wants to have their own way and refuses to give in under any circumstances. There are constant quarrels, fights, and wars among them. They kill each other outright, with complete impunity. There, it's truly the rule of the strong. Whoever is stronger is right. And they celebrate. The strong kill the weaker one and calmly eat him raw, not even caring that the defeated is still warm and not quite dead yet. On Venus they mostly eat animal food, including animals, sometimes people, and anything available for sustenance. Mothers sometimes eat their own child, always raw and without preparation, because they have no way to roast or boil. Since there is no fire on the entire planet, they don't even know what fire is. In general, they don't take care of themselves or their planet at all. Leftovers, food scraps and remains from their homes. All the trash stays right there in their dwellings and all around them. All of this rots, spreads stench, pollutes air, water, soil and causes disease. People die by the hundreds and thousands, and their corpses rot right there near their homes. Predatory animals attack and wipe out entire communities of people. Because humans can't defend themselves against wild animals. No one wants to work for others, no one wants to stand up for or help another, so there's no way to form any kind of society for any kind of defense. Everyone thinks only about themselves, and everyone is an enemy to their neighbor. There is no friendship, love, or compassion. They live together but remain emotionally distant, openly showing their hatred whenever possible. There is no science on Venus, and people's understanding of God and virtues is very limited. Unlike Earth, Venus's inhabitants were not given a guardian angel by God. The inhabitants of Venus are left entirely to their own devices, and each lives as they wish, as their conscience and their ignorant mind allow them. With no instructions from above or guidance from guardian spirits. Subtitles by Dima Torzok. Subtitles created by Dima Torzok. How should one not live, and to what depths can a person fall when living independently and not asking for God's help? The absence of this higher guidance from God is taken advantage of in the broadest sense by evil forces. It has completely taken over the entire planet and, invisibly to people, leads them to commit evil deeds. To violate someone's will or force a person to do the evil that he does not want to do Of course, it can't do so on Venus, just as it can't on Earth or anywhere else in the universe. But to call forth from the hidden recesses of each soul an evil feeling or evil inclination akin to itself is incomparably easier for it on Venus than anywhere else, because by himself, a resident of Venus is unable to offer any resistance, and he has no guardian angel who can protect him at all times and warn him of impending danger. Undoubtedly, all the evil desires and inclinations present in every person would eventually reveal themselves on their own. Therefore, the evil force actually does good for people by provoking them in a timely manner, thus making the reaction easier and faster. For this service rendered by the evil force, the person of Venus should only be grateful to it, because it truly gives him great help by shortening the time of his stay in this difficult life. Life on Venus is indeed short-lived. It is half as long as our earthly life. Rarely does anyone on Venus live longer than 50 of our years. Still, despite Venus's hardships, people are even less willing to live than those on Earth. Death terrifies them more than it does Earth's inhabitants, and no illness or suffering makes them wish for or accept their own death. They battle death like it's their greatest enemy, and at the same time they are unable to evoke even a drop of sympathy or a word of comfort from anyone around them. And they die unreconciled with their conscience, not knowing what death is, where it leads, or why it is needed. After their death, people live in the astrospheres of Venus and, under the guidance of spirit guardians, come to terms with the life they have just lived. They remember their life, all their actions, and all their misdeeds. The spirit guardian leads them to other planets, shows them how people with greater moral development live, and takes them to Earth and Mars. He points out to them the difference between how they should have acted and how they actually behaved and acted. He teaches them goodness, encourages repentance, and inspires a sincere desire to improve. If a person only begins to realize that he is sinful, if he only becomes aware of the difference between good and evil and makes a sincere decision to improve, then the difficult task of life on Venus for this young and still inexperienced soul can be considered complete. Venus is a planet of testing. Venus is a God-given purpose of life on it, which is to bring out the dark and evil sides of the soul's qualities, if only they are all brought out. If a person has recognized them in himself and also realized that without God's help he cannot cope on his own, he asks God to help him with this. If he sincerely decides to correct himself in his next life, then his trials on Venus are considered complete. And this soul is brought before God's judgment. At God's judgment, the soul consciously and voluntarily promises God to correct its past sins and evil deeds with its next life and to atone for all the evil it has brought into the world. After this, God blesses it for life on earth. He grants it new gifts of His grace, renews it, and once again, the reborn soul is transferred to the realms of earth, where with new strength and the most joyful feeling of a relieved heart, it begins its new life activity. Moving from Venus to Earth is already a great reward for its inhabitants. After their hard life on Venus, Earth feels like paradise. He cannot wish for more, as he cannot imagine a better or higher life, and it could not bring him as much happiness as life on earth, which he has long dreamed of, which is understandable and accessible to him, and which is the ideal of his aspirations. Part 2: Life on Earth and Mars. This is how, without any of those quirky American Mars rovers or photoshopped Martian images taken in the Nevada deserts, it tells us about life on Mars. The textbook being studied? With this post, we continue our introduction to the textbook for the Tsar's officers. It's well known that documents from that era are falsified, distorted, incomplete, or replaced by official history. However, all these intrigues act as a sieve, filtering out the chosen ones. Those who thirst for knowledge, those who need it, will obtain it. For the rest, those who do not make an effort, such knowledge will only be harmful. A lot has been written about life on Earth in textbooks, and mostly these are moral and philosophical reflections, about 50 pages or so let's limit ourselves to describing the mechanism of the soul's transition from one planet to another. Well, and then about life on Mars, we'll post all this existing material life on Earth. At first, after their transition to Earth, a person lives in the astral spheres of Earth, in astral bodies, at a degree of materiality corresponding to this sphere, which is already incomparably more rarefied than the sphere of Venus. Here, he becomes acquainted with earthly life in all its details and, under the guidance of spirit guardians, prepares to enter it. Now, he himself chooses the kind of life trials that seem most useful for his improvement. The spirit guardian only advises and guides his choice. At the same time, the spirit guardian already assigns him certain duties to oversee some part of the universe. He entrusts him with the care of certain animals, fish, birds, or insects, or assigns him to guide certain natural phenomena, or to oversee or direct events in the plant kingdom, or something else for which this person proves to be most capable. No one should refuse to use their abilities and strengths, to fulfill divine destinies, to participate in the general movement of the world process, and to work under the guidance and instruction of the guardian spirits. Having rested from the previous difficult life on Venus, having become accustomed to life on Earth and chosen a type of earthly trial, a person is born on Earth in a coarse material body, with a determined and most sincere intention, with good deeds in this life, to cover all the sins and misdeeds committed on Venus, and thus atone for the evil he brought into the world. Thus we, all the inhabitants of Earth, begin to live here under very complicated circumstances. Life on Venus exposed all our flaws, vices and sins, but did nothing to fix them. On Venus we acquired bad and sinful habits and skills which we promised God we would give up and overcome. Here on Earth, or in other words, we fell on Venus and entered earthly life stained and tainted, with the obligation to wash off all this filth through our earthly life and cover it with our good deeds. This circumstance makes our earthly life extremely complicated. We'd be much less tied to it if it didn't weigh on us. This is, so to speak, the Lord's curse, for which we ourselves are directly to blame and therefore directly responsible. At the same time, under these conditions, we have no right to ask ourselves, why do I suffer on earth when I have done nothing wrong? We have all already brought so much sorrow to our Creator and have sown so much evil among our neighbors and in the visible world, even before entering earthly life, that we must humbly bear our cross on earth, obediently submit to the will of God, diligently strive for self-improvement, and endure with dignity all the trials that life on earth presents to us. Earth is a planet of atonement for sins, and therefore the main purpose of life on Earth is first, to rid ourselves of the sinful habits we acquired while living on Venus, and in general to break away from and become unaccustomed to evil. Second, to get used to doing good and start developing it within ourselves. And third, through good deeds done on Earth, to cover and atone for all the evil we have brought into the outer world, into ourselves and into the beings around us, along with all its consequences. By delving into the main meaning of the purpose of earthly life, anyone will understand that Earth is not yet a planet of happiness and bliss, but a planet of hard and intense work on transforming oneself and one's inner being. The lack of development of goodness rooted within it, practice in its broadest sense, is not the purpose of life on Earth. That will be the purpose of life on the next planet after Earth, Mars. There, a person will live in goodness, do good on the broadest scale, become rooted in it, and reap its joyful fruits. Life on Mars. The blessing of God to transfer one's life activity from Earth to Mars is always met by a person with the greatest delight. Living on Earth and visiting Mars, he has long been familiar with life there. Therefore, he knows very well that life both in the astral spheres of Mars and on the material planet is incomparably better than life on Earth and its astral spheres. Therefore, he wholeheartedly thanks God for his great mercies, fully understanding that a better paradise cannot be expected from God. All the life and aspirations of the inhabitants of Mars are completely understandable to a person from Earth. There are no difficult or impossible tasks for him in the life of Mars, and at the same time all living conditions are so easy and convenient that a person could not even dare to dream of them on Earth. Having moved from the spheres of Earth to the spheres of Mars, a renewed, reborn and redeemed person receives a body of Martian astral matter, which is incomparably more rarefied than the body of the Earth's sphere. Now his spiritual powers and abilities have become incomparably greater. His body is more rarefied, his spirit more powerful, his understanding of truth deeper, and therefore he is given the opportunity to freely visit incomparably larger regions of the universe. His horizons expand daily, as at first, especially, he constantly explores those new worlds and new spheres of different lives that have only now become accessible to him. He studies them, becomes acquainted with them, and enriches his knowledge. The guardian spirits from the heavenly powers now entrust him with a significant responsibility for the universe and its beings. He is now responsible for his own actions, and he is given many beings of lesser development than himself to guide and instruct. On the spheres of Mars, he lives incomparably longer than he did on the spheres of Earth. This stay is extraordinarily pleasant and joyful for him. The responsibilities placed upon him form a continuous series of ever-changing happiness and bliss. In fulfilling each responsibility entrusted to him, he feels within himself the greatest reward from the Lord, which gives him new strength and the ability to be useful to God in carrying out his holy designs. Every good deed strengthens his love for God and for all that he has created, and at the same time gives him even greater opportunities to spread his goodness among people to an ever-increasing degree. His entire stay in the spheres of Mars is one supremely joyful and happy day, strengthening and uplifting all his spiritual powers, bringing him closer to God and making him a being fully complete in soul, devoted to God and joyfully accepting his gaze. How great is the happiness, the bliss that he experiences while staying in the spheres of Mars. As he slightly emphasized the knowledge of truth and how little he has approached God, yet he begins to feel that there is a happiness higher than his own, for there is a knowledge of truth deeper than what he possesses. There are degrees of love and goodness that are still beyond his reach. He still cannot approach God to the extent that he currently desires, to the extent that has already become a need for him now. To achieve this, he knows that he must strengthen himself even more in goodness and love through a new life. In the planet's coarse body, goodness is reborn on Mars. Despite the fact that life in a material body on Mars is not as easy and blissful as life in its spheres, he consciously asks God for permission to accept this life. He knows that through it he will become more rooted in greater goodness and love, and have more chances to benefit him by better understanding the mysteries of his wisdom. If God blesses his choice, then he is born on Mars and, at his first appearance in life, receives a guardian angel, with whom he never parts until his life and all the afterlife state of Mars come to an end. He chooses his own way of life on Mars. He knows the weaknesses in his spiritual growth that kept him from God and understands which trials would benefit him most, having closely studied the lives of people on Mars. By making this choice consciously, he is confident that he will achieve good results through life on Mars. For the awareness of life and the life tasks of the planet, Mars are not as deeply hidden from people as they are on Earth. Living conditions are easier and more pleasant. On Mars, there are no countries, states, language barriers, nationalities, or hostility between people. With no property or money, there are no rich or poor, no luxury or need, and thus no envy. On Mars, there aren't even cities, those large, crowded population centers that pollute the air, water, land, and people and create need, diseases, corruption of mind and body, and everything that comes with concentration, exploitation of one another, domination, power, oppression, and all kinds of violence. With all this, of course, on Mars there is no military class, no courts, no police, no authority, and no superiors. Other than the word of God, there is no other scourge except for the love of God and the fear of angering Him and breaking His commandments. The holy law. On Mars, everyone is truly a servant to their neighbor, the most loyal helper and a considerate, caring friend. There, it is already considered a sin not to do a good deed or not to show the attention to your neighbor that you could have given. Everyone considers it their most sacred duty to anticipate the wishes of their neighbor if even the slightest opportunity arises, and to show everyone the warmest attention and heartfelt participation. On Mars, everyone equally shares all benefits and responsibilities, while also being the most dedicated worker, always ready to devote all his activities and efforts to improving and preserving his planet, and to increasing its productivity. Any luxury or excess is already considered a sin, for what lies unproductively without any use or need for one person could be of benefit to another, and therefore this is already considered theft. Mainly, all the attention and efforts of the inhabitants of Mars are focused on cultivating the soil and the plants that grow on it, since on Mars, both people and animals eat exclusively plant-based food, mostly fruits. The concept of murder does not exist on the planet in its most detailed form. Only their God has the right to take it away, and no one else. Everyone must, following the example of the Creator, increase what is living, not destroy it. On Mars, if you count the duration of time according to our calendar, people live on average up to 500 years. The soil of Mars is unusually loose and light. It is incomparably lighter than ours. We could only compare it in terms of weight to the lightest down or fluffy snow, and we definitely wouldn't be able to walk on it. All matter on Mars shares this rarefaction and lightness. Their water wouldn't quench our thirst, we could nearly breathe it. Their air is also rarefied. All things on the planet are light and delicate. You can't say that the inhabitants of Mars earn their bread by the sweat of their brow, because for them, work is a pleasant, effortless pastime. The whole task of agriculture, for example, comes down to the best cultivation of new plant species. But besides all this, the inhabitants of Mars possess such advanced machines and such an abundance of all kinds of free engines that we, the inhabitants of Earth, can't even imagine them. They use various automatic machines, tools, and all sorts of different devices with their free engines. On Mars, there are many plants that glow at night and light up with various colors. The inhabitants of Mars make extensive use of this quality. At night, the gardens are lit up as if it were day. A home is for rest, solitude, and prayer, so everyone has their own special room. This condition is considered mandatory and no one deviates from it. The inhabitants of Mars don't even have extra clothes. When they need new ones, they get them at the factory and leave the old ones there. In general terms, the people of Mars are similar to us. One could say that they look just like us if it weren't for the fact that they are incomparably more beautiful, more refined, and lighter and more graceful in all their movements, manners, and gestures. Their appearance radiates intelligence, confidence, willpower, and vitality, making them look like us. The beauty of the women is astonishing, as is their modesty, their elegance and grace in every movement, every gesture, in everything. It has been brought to such a high degree that each of us, an inhabitant of Earth, would bow before each of them and be absolutely delighted. Men and women are incomparably equal and dress almost the same without getting into petty details. On Mars, people typically travel by flying through the air, both in look and method. All flying vehicles are extremely diverse. They use all kinds of engines, mostly electric, but there are also flying vehicles controlled by the power of will. At all joyful gatherings, not only people participate, but also their guardian angels. They have fun alongside people, run around carelessly, and engage in conversations or play music or sing. There is, however, a disease on Mars which, in their understanding, is terrible and brings sadness and sorrow to the whole area. From time to time, people appear on Mars who haven't completely gotten rid of their earthly habits and tendencies. Some of them want to rule, others reluctantly allow others to use what they themselves have claimed as their property and begin to hide their belongings. And they keep things they don't need and aren't using at the moment. Such behavior immediately draws attention to them. Moreover, after their moral corruption, their bodies coarsen and take on earthly traits. As a result, he cannot hide his illness from others in any way. Christ lived on this planet twice, and during his 2 stays, he revealed to people everything they need to know and what they should hold on to. Knowing this, everyone knows what to avoid and what to be wary of. On Mars, everyone reaches the truth directly, without the scientific tricks we on Earth believe will eventually lead us to it. On Mars, there are schools for animals, and in them they learn to work and be useful to humans. This science is mastered so successfully that there are animals who work almost as efficiently as some machines, and they perform their work so conscientiously that there is no need to urge them on. Naturally, no one would permit themselves to hit an animal or even act impatiently toward it. After dying on Mars, a person continues existing in the spheres around the planet. There, he finds nothing new, since during his life in Mars's material body, he visited these spheres several times and is quite familiar with them. He knows that the bliss of each person does not depend on where he is, but on the amount of goodness and love in a person's soul and on how close he is to God. Therefore, dying with a peaceful heart, he, without any interruption, like the heavenly powers, takes upon himself the care for the success of God's works, and his happiness and bliss have no end. He remains in the blessed astral spheres of Mars until God predestines him for life on Jupiter.